Hey, everybody. Welcome back. For those of you just coming in and those already seated, if you could just squeeze into the middle of the rows, it's really helpful as people file in. They don't have to climb over you to sit down. So if you have a seat towards you in the middle, just shift over. And if you could do that throughout the day, it would be really helpful. We're happy we're back on schedule, which is great. We like that. Our next speaker is Reed Johnson from Atlassian. He's been with us for almost 4 years, which is amazing. And he is a product analyst at Atlassian. A little fun fact about Reed is that he is a huge Golden State Warriors fan. They have a very big game against the Clippers tonight, so send your positive vibes that way. And he wanted to remind everyone that the Denver Broncos are also undefeated. Come on up, Reed.
Oh, thank you. Any of the buttons work?
Use the right one.
Use the right one. Can you guys hear me? All right, I'll be taking questions about the Warriors and the Broncos after. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. I'm Reed. I'm a product analyst, and I want to tell you about how Atlassian uses analytics to build good products. And we'll start with our imaginations. And let's pretend we're all driving our car, and we don't know what a speedometer is. But we do need to know how fast we're going because people are out there giving tickets, right? So what do? To figure out how fast we're going, we look at the cars around us. We try to see how fast they're going. We might try to measure the wind speed, see how fast it's going past the car. We might see how much weight's in the car, how many people are in it, how much luggage have we got. There's all sorts of signals coming in that we can start to make use of to see how fast we're going. But still, we're going to be getting tickets, right? And been in that position. A fair few of us, I know I have. It doesn't feel good. And you can imagine going back home to your partner and saying, hey, I got another ticket today, but don't worry about it. I got this great model. It takes the wind speed. It takes how hard I'm stepping on the gas. It takes the weight of the car, the incline of the road. And it's really accurate. It just sometimes doesn't work, right? And she's like, dude, just get a speedometer, right? And that's the same thing that's what we're all looking for. We're looking for something that takes data and makes it obvious what we need to do, right? We can all look at this. We can see that it's at 130 miles per hour. We're going too fast, right? There's not too much mental overhead that we need to use to get to that conclusion, right? And it's the same in software. We've got a lot of signals coming at us. In JIRA, we know how many people are creating issues. We know what they're doing with these issues. There's all sorts of things that are going on in the products, but we don't need to take all of these things and do something really complicated. We just need a speedometer for our product. We need something that tells us when we're going too fast, something that tells us when we're going too slow, and tells us when we need to make a change, right? How do we do this? That's what I'm going to talk about here today. Hopefully other people are using data as well and are interested. And how do we do this? We use the pyramid of analytics, right? And the pyramid of analytics sits on a base of data literacy, getting people in your organization to understand that analytics exist, that they're coming from your products, and that they're real and that they can trust them. That's step one. After that, we start building funnels. These are the speedometers for our products, right? This is how we take the data and make it actionable. From there, we start running experiments. You can't just step on the gas or hit the brakes when you're building software. You need to run experiments to see when you actually make a change, are we hitting the gas or are we stepping on the brake, right? And at the very top, there's data science. And I'm not really going to talk about data science in this talk, except to say that it's at the very top, and you shouldn't be trying to get into data science until you've built up the base of that pyramid, right? If you're doing it from step one, you're missing things. So to begin with, I'm going to talk about how Atlassian started using data about 3-4 years ago, and kind of a lot of the problems that we faced. And then I'm going to talk about the pyramid and talk about how we built up from the bottom and how we corrected a lot of the problems that we had. So to begin with, the Atlassian Journey. It wasn't very cruisy. It wasn't easy at first. And just to give you some perspective, in 2012, we had 400 staff, and we had 0 product analysts. So nobody was looking at data, really. You know, we had PMs. They were making product decisions, and they were doing things like talking to people like you, and you're all very helpful, right? But you're not everybody. And you know, we want to actually see what people are actually doing with our products rather than just rely on people to give us customer feedback. And so we started collecting data when we created a growth team. And you may have heard about growth hacking. We heard about it. We heard that people were getting 10x, 20x improvements to their conversion rates all over the place. Even Obama was doing it. And growth hacking, if you're not familiar, is where you play with different things, you run experiments, and you optimize for conversion rate. In this example, Obama's campaign played with different pictures and different videos on their sign-up page. They played with different CTAs on their sign-up button, all to get more people to join the movement or enter their email address and their zip code, right? And by getting the winning combination of sign-up button and media, they were able to get more people involved in their campaign. So we wanted to do something like this. So what we wanted to do was optimize the conversion rate in JIRA. We wanted more people who tried the product to buy it. We had a bit of a scattershot approach, right? We knew that we wanted more people to buy, but we didn't really know what their problems were. So we tried a million things and very rarely hit the target, right? We didn't know what the problems were, so we didn't know what we needed to solve. We built a model to tell us if people were going to convert early, so we didn't have to wait 60 days for them to actually convert or not. And when we told people about this model, they ended up seeing what's on this chalkboard rather than something that would predict conversion rates. It confused people rather than empowered them, right? And even when we did take 60 days, measure conversion rates, say we're going to make things better for JIRA by implementing some experiment that we ran, people said, nah, I've got a roadmap. I'm too busy to do this, right? People didn't buy in. Or they'd say, not in my product. Great, you did something good. Sure, I can maybe buy into that, but I don't agree with how you did it, right? We're not going to do it. Or they'd say, you did what? Right? They didn't understand anything about where the data came from, the experimental process. They didn't buy in. And once we were done explaining to them all the stuff that we'd done, they'd go back and say, all right, mate, we've got a roadmap. We're too busy. We can't do this, right? So we faced problems. I can't say that we were growth hackers at the time. Right? We were trying, but we weren't making much progress. And how come we weren't making progress? Again, it's because we started too high on the pyramid. We were doing experimentation, we were doing data science, but we skipped everything on the bottom, right? And when that happens, your data pyramid collapses. Your foundation is weak and it collapses. It eventually disappears, and you end up with something that's more like a crystal ball of analytics. And that's where analysts like myself communicate with the database in weird languages, and then they produce numbers that nobody knows how they got and nobody agrees with, right? It's more like I'm pulling things out of the ether than pulling things out of the products that you guys built and that you guys use, right? So this is the problem that we need to fix. Just to take a poll of the audience, how many of you guys are trying to use data within your organizations, right? And how many of you can understand this analogy? All right, great. Then you're in the right place. Okay, this is good. Right. So again, the pyramid of analytics rests on a base of data literacy. This is the most important thing, and this takes the most time, right? This is convincing people that data is there and it's real and it's actionable. And then we start creating funnels, and that takes the data that people understand that is there and that it's real, and that makes it actionable for them. It makes it easy for them to see what's going on and start taking action from it. And then we run experiments to see if we can actually make changes to these funnels, right? We want to do something. We've decided there's a problem and we want to fix it. This is how we go about fixing it. And then, again, all the way at the top, there's data science. We don't skip to this step, right? And the most important thing to know is there's no shortcuts. Save the shortcuts for your workout. When you want to do good data stuff at your organization, take the time and build from the bottom. Right, so data literacy. What is it? How do we build it? Just to remind you, it's the base of the pyramid. And it's just getting people to become data literate. It's like teaching kids to read, right? Kids aren't born knowing how to read. You need to teach them what letters are and how to interpret the things around them in the world. And it's the same in your organization. People need to understand, what is the data that we have? Where does it come from? When I see things, are they real? And then once they get that basic understanding of things, then you can start reading data novels or writing data poetry, if you will, but not before then. Right? And how do we get this started? We start with vanity metrics. Vanity metrics are much maligned because it's working, right? They're not actionable, right? I can't do much with the knowledge that there's 2 million issues created per week in JIRA, right? Or that there's 220,000 pages created per week in Confluence. I can't take that data and make any conclusions, right? But they're big and people like them. That's one important thing. And they might start people down the right road, right? If I see that there's 2 million issues created per week in JIRA and I'm a developer, I might say, how do we know that? How do you get that information? I might ask, how many of those issues get transitioned? How many of them belong to sprints? How many of them get resolved? Right? And these are the questions that really start to make this data exciting and fun. So giving people big numbers and catching their attention, that's step one. How do we do this at Atlassian? How do we share these numbers? We blog about them. I know that you guys are not blogging about anything because I told you that there's 220,000 pages created in Confluence every week. There's 3,000 blogs, right? It's about 1%. So this is how we share data at Atlassian. This is the main way we share anything within the company. This is kind of the life force of our company. Give it a try. Start blogging. I'm going to know it if you do. We also put charts in Confluence, right? This is how we get people involved with data in a place where they actually work and do work every day, right? We put it in the place that they're comfortable. We use the Bob Swift plugin toolchain. We can connect to databases. We can dynamically produce charts. We can create variables for people to select from. Check it out if you never have. It's an important tool for us, right? And it allows people to see numbers, write comments, collaborate on things, and be in a place where they're familiar. Sometimes Confluence isn't enough, and it's important that people have access to data for them to become data literate. If they can't ask questions themselves and they have to go through people like me, again, you start finding yourself with a crystal ball. We built a tool called Release Buster with the tagline, "I reject your reality and substitute my own," with the idea that people thought that people were using our products one way and they really weren't. And to emphasize this idea, we drew a line for a release date and we said, hey, look, the lines don't really change on either side of this line. It was a bit more of the stick than the carrot. It's recently been rebranded to Insights to avoid hurting people's feelings. But it's important. The idea is that it's important to get people access to the data themselves. They have to be able to do things for themselves or they'll never buy in. And wherever you create friction, people get turned off and they're not going to look, right? You need to give people a way to see data for themselves. Another thing we did was we created product outreach teams. And this is where we found people that had a sympathetic ear within the organization and we gave them some firepower, right? We created teams surrounding these people who were data ambassadors to their teams, right? If Ryan wanted to use some data, we'd give him everything we could to make sure he was successful and that he could spread data of the rest of his team, right? We wanted to empower people. That's a bottom-up approach. We've also used the top-down approach, right? Getting managers to ask people how many people are using their features, how often they're being used, is a great way to get them to care. And last, if you're not convinced that data literacy is important, just keep in mind that developers create the data. They're the data chefs, if you will, right? So if you're looking for data, if you're an analyst, if you're anybody who cares, and the developers aren't creating data, if they're not adding analytics to your products, then it's like going into an empty fridge. There's no answers to any of your questions because the data doesn't exist, right? So how do you know if you have a data literate company? First, there's a culture of looking at data, right? When people are having conversations, they say, where's the data? What do we have to support this claim, right? And you don't necessarily need to be good at answering these questions, but people have to be thinking, is there any data that we can use to have this conversation, right? That's part of your culture. Second, data is accessible. People need to be able to access data. If they can't, then you have work to do. And last, which I think is the best barometer to tell whether you've got a data literate organization, is are developers adding analytic features? If this isn't happening, then you've got work to do. If it is happening, then maybe it's okay to move on to the next step. What is the next step? Funnels, right? Again, funnels are the speedometers for your organization. When people look at funnels, they can draw conclusions easily. What is a funnel? It's where you take a large group of people, You lose them in discrete steps along the path towards a target, a common goal, a target, right? You may be familiar with this from sales organizations. People come in, some of them get qualified. Those qualified leads get passed off to salespeople. They close deals, right? And you lose people along each step, right? And with the information about how many people are lost in each step, you can make decisions like we need more people qualifying leads. We need better salespeople or more salespeople. You can start finding information about how your organization needs to improve. One of the most common funnels that we've seen is the Pirate Metrics funnel. You may be familiar with it. It's called Pirate Metrics because altogether they are the R funnel. Acquisition, which is how do customers find us, right? And then activation. Do they have a great experience and then do they stick around? Retention, do they stick around for very long or do they turn away? Revenue, do they pay us? And referral, do they bring in other people? And with this information, you can kind of see which part of my business do I need to focus on. And within each step of this funnel, there's many funnels, right? For acquisition, how many people land on your website? How many of them navigate to your products page? How many of those people sign up for an evaluation? For activation, we've got an onboarding funnel. For example, in JIRA, we have people show up. They create evaluations, right? Some of those people sign in. Some of them create a project. I think we can all agree that creating a project is pretty important for you to evaluate JIRA. You've also got to create an issue. You've got to create a second issue probably, or else you can probably do it all in your head. You don't need JIRA. You probably need a friend. You probably need a second user. And then eventually you're going to purchase, right? So we've broken this down into a few obvious steps. And it's important to note that I haven't used data to produce this, right? I'm not letting the data build the funnel for me. I'm using my common sense, right? And this is, I think, where people get hung up. They want some data scientist to come in and say, these are the important things that you need to do for onboarding, right? But it's not that complicated. It's just about finding out, with your knowledge, what things people need to do, and find out how many people are doing those things, right? And then the obvious things show up. Just to put these numbers in perspective, sorry, I have to add the disclaimer. These aren't real onboarding numbers for JIRA. They're similar, but I couldn't disclose the actual things. 10% of people might not make it past sign-in. You know, they create an evaluation, they don't sign in. 5% of those people drop off after that. 18% of the people might not create their first issue, and so on and so forth. So we can add numbers to these. We can kind of see, with respect to the step above them, how many people fell out, and then, you know, respect with all the other steps, how many people are lost, right? And if you start creating funnels, you'll realize you've got issues. There's things you need to solve, right? And they should be obvious. It should be like reading a speedometer, right? You've got issues. So how do you know when you're creating funnels well? I think it's, you know, maybe a more fuzzy thing than for data literacy, but the idea is that funnels are central to data conversation, right? When people ask questions about data, are you building funnels and are you using them to answer the questions? If not, then you've got work to do. And then how do we start taking action? We've got funnels, we've isolated issues. How do you start taking action? Well, you start using experiments, right? And this is where we started, again, previously. And I said we were unfocused. We weren't sure really what problems we needed to fix. We've started creating funnels and we've started isolating these problems. And what is experimentation? It's science, right? It's using the scientific method to address problems. And to remind you guys, this is probably familiar with, the scientific method starts with a problem. You propose a solution to that problem. You run an experiment, an A/B test in the software world. You look at the results, and you make a conclusion. And again, this is a tried and tested system, and it's a way to kind of see, I've got this problem that I've identified. I need to go faster. I need to go slower. When I press this button within my software, am I actually going faster? Am I actually going slower? Am I at the same speed, which is what we find most often? We normally don't change things. Right? So let's take an example. I've seen that 18% of the people who create a project never create an issue. There's obviously a problem within JIRA onboarding if that's happening, right? And I want to fix it. So something that we've tried on our team is taking that normal create button and changing it to log issue, right? A very simple change. I need to also add a disclaimer that these changes don't have to be tiny, right? We could have added a whole big onboarding flow that teaches you what a feature, what an issue is, or railroaded you through the process and made you create an issue, right? These don't have to be small changes. It's just a simple example. And we remember what this looks like, right? We ran an experiment. We try a few times. We don't hit the mark. Eventually, we might see that people have started creating issues, right? And it's likely that none of the other bars will move, right? We've isolated one thing and we fixed it. We haven't seen a ripple down effect. If we're really lucky, we will. And we'll see everything else ripple down, and we'll see changes across the board. But again, most times, we'll see that we've moved one bar. And eventually, we're getting to a point where we're checking things off, and we're figuring out which things are fixed and which things still need to be worked on. And that way, instead of using the shotgun approach and trying to fix everything at once, we can start narrowing things down. I fixed one thing, I fixed another thing. What I need to fix now is people creating a second issue, right? And this is how we make progress as a team. This is how we iteratively fix our products and make them intuitive, right? And again, I'd like to say that this happens with features too. I talked about JIRA issues previously. How many of them get transitions once? How many of them get resolved? These are the things that we're looking at within the product. These are the feature funnels that we're trying to optimize, right? It's not just an onboarding problem. It's not just a growth hacking problem. But at this point, if you're doing this, then you can call yourself a growth hacker. Maybe not a designer, but definitely a growth hacker. So how do you know when you're running experiments well? First, you're using experimentation to resolve debates. We have a lot of conversations at Atlassian where we say, I think that this is going to be a great feature, and I think that that thing that you're talking about is not, right? How do we resolve these? We run experiments. At Atlassian, we have kebab bets, right? Where when we have an argument, we'll say, okay, we'll bet a kebab on it, and we'll run an experiment. And they're normally quick and easy, and we can do them within a week. And we can figure out who's right? And the loser has to buy kebab for the winner. This is obvious, but you need to have tooling around experimentation. People need to be able to run experiments across the business. Again, there can't be bottlenecks. People can't run experiments when they want to, and they have to go through some team in order to do so, right? You need to make them easy to run and easy to do. And along with that, analysis needs to be self-service, right? People need to be able to get access to the numbers right away. They can't be waiting for people like me to go look at them. Maybe if there's a lot of experiments, it takes me 2-3 weeks, and then people don't care about what happened anyways, and they've gone and built something already. So experiment analysis needs to be self-service. So that's it for the agenda. We've talked about the Atlassian Journey. We started as a growth hacking team. We weren't really very successful. Even when we did have successes, people didn't care. We had a crystal ball, something that may be familiar to all you guys. Started by creating data literacy within the organization, right? We needed people to understand what we were doing. We needed people to understand the data. And we did that by blogging about things, using vanity metrics, creating product outreach teams, and getting Mike and Scott to ask big questions, right? And we started creating funnels to make that data obvious and make it simple and let people use it. And then we started running experiments again, and we've been much better since, right? And again, we're only now breaking into the data science realm. We tried it earlier. It didn't do well. Now is it time for us to really get into it. There's no shortcuts, right? Save them for your workout. If you want to build a great data organization within your team, go step by step. Again, emphasis, build from the top up, work hard to do it this way, and you'll be successful. Thanks.
Great. So we have a couple minutes to do a little Q&A. Thanks for those of you that submitted questions through the app. If you haven't downloaded the app already, that's how you can ask questions, and you can shoot them through right now, and we might potentially get to them. But I wanted to start with a question for you, Reed. How do you get people to stop manipulating data to meet or need a goal? I see managers rationalize the bad data as not realistic.
How do we do this? I think that creating funnels, again, is the best way for data to speak for itself. If you think that people are saying, don't ignore this part of a funnel, right? There's nothing going on there. We normally run an experiment. And if we run a lot of experiments, we start to learn about what's actually going on along in the funnel. If our experiments aren't working, right, then we dig in further and we start to segment the people who fall out. And we start to do deeper analysis on the people who fall out of that step of the funnel. But yeah, I'd say that when people are just quoting numbers, it's easy to do. If you start looking at the funnels, it kind of makes things obvious for everybody, and they're hard to manipulate.
Awesome. Got another question here. What solutions or tools do you use to bake in analytics, and what do developers use?
Developers use a common library to add analytics. We have our own in-house analytics system where they create events and they fire up to S3, and then we process them from there. We've also used a number of tools in the past, Mixpanel to name one, Google Analytics to name another. There's a lot of tools out there, Kissmetrics, Mode Analytics. There's a lot of things out there that'll help you collect analytics and make it easier for your team. I don't know if that answers the question. Nobody's saying it didn't, so we can move on.
It does. I think you nailed it.
Okay.
Thanks for sending questions through. They're coming through, and we have a bunch to answer here. We have about 3 more minutes. Let's see here. On-demand must have been a big unlock for data. Are you worried about bias or problems from primary cloud instance data?
We are. Absolutely we are. To deal with that, we try to we still listen to you guys. This isn't all that we use to make decisions with our products. And we have PMs whose job it is to kind of take the data that I produce and that other people produce and weigh it against the things that they're hearing from customers. There is a careful balance that we try to strike. I don't think we're great at it yet. There is a way for you guys to opt in and send us analytics from your server instances, and that helps. So if you're keen on making our products better, please do. But yeah, that's my answer to that question.
Awesome. How technical are our PMs? I run into a lot of gut feedback PMs.
They are. There's different levels of technicality within for our PMs. Some of them like to write SQL. Some of them avoid it like the plague. We're working on them, and again, making data easy to access and making a UI around data is probably the best way to take non-technical PMs and make them as technical as possible.
Cool. Can you give an example of how you make data self-service?
We have this tool that I showed, Release Buster. We're building our experiment analysis framework right now, so it's not self-service at the moment at Atlassian, and it's one of the major pain points we face. People run experiments, and then it requires anywhere between a day to 2 weeks, depending on mine and people like me's workload, to get it out. And we frequently find that people care a lot less about the experiment they ran 2 weeks after it's finished than the day after. So that's one of the main reasons self-service analysis is needed. How have we made it self-service? Well, we've built the tool Insights now that allows people to go and kind of see how often their features are being used right away. The data gets there within a few hours, and they can kind of see what's happening immediately after a release. Is that the right answer?
I think that works. Let's see here. This might not be a question you can answer. Can Atlassian provide their Insights app on the marketplace or provide access to its open source code?
I'll talk about open source. I don't think we can make it available on the marketplace. We are talking about building other things or ways for you to get insights into how people are using your specific instance. Insights is meant to kind of aggregate everything from everybody, and I don't think we can make that available. But yeah, we are brainstorming ways to help you understand how people are using your products or your instances of JIRA and Confluence specifically, and maybe how that they compare to other people like you. And that's something we're thinking about.
Cool. We have time for one more. Just wanted to thank all you guys for sending questions in. This is awesome. So how do you run experiments? Is it with a small user group or just within a specific team company?
We let any team within Atlassian run an experiment. If you're working on the editor of Confluence, you can run experiments. If you're on the growth team, you're focused on onboarding. Again, we do a number of things to generate ideas. It used to be a developer kind of saying, I don't like this, and then building an experiment to fix it. Now we're being more targeted by building funnels and trying to address specific problems. We also have UX people and customer researchers coming in and giving us ideas and telling us more giving us other inputs to figure out what things we need to do and how we can actually fix these problems in good ways.
Awesome. Let's give a round of applause for Reed. Alrighty, it is lunchtime. There's a couple things we have for you in store for lunch. I think the first best thing is to go and get your lunch. But if you registered for the Women in Tech lunch, that's in the Mission Grill. You can also meet and chat with any of the speakers from the Innovate track in this room. So grab your lunch, come on back. Reed will be here. Jim, who talked earlier, will be here. Some of the speakers from the other tracks will also be in this room or the other Golden Gate A and B rooms. If you want something a little more out of the ordinary, check out Speechless in the Yerba Buena Salon, 7 through 9. Audience members will be pulled on stage at random, and we'll have to give 5-minute presentations on slides they haven't seen before. Might be a good time to have a good laugh. And that's about it from lunch. Check your agendas as well. There's some other things going on. But if you want to talk to Reed, seems like everyone has lots of questions. Go get your lunch and come back, and he will be here, and we can answer questions. We'll start again at 1:15 with Alistair Simpson, who's a designer on the Atlassian Confluence team. Thanks, everyone.